This month, Scientific American had an article on a weird process called photopheresis.
Photopheresis?
Photopheresis. It's the gory process by which the patient ingests a compound called sorrelin, P-S-O-R-A-L-E-N. Have you ever smelled the rue? I hope you're not real sensitive to the rue. I'm not. But the rue contains sorrelin, as does citrus and bishop's weed and several other vegetables, parsnip and celery in very small quantities. But in this process called photopheresis, the patient is given the sorrelin, blood is withdrawn from the patient, and then the blood is irradiated with ultraviolet light. And in this process, some of the leukemic cells are damaged. Then they re-inject this blood into the patient, and it tends to vaccinate him against further encroachment of the leukemia. So these sorrelins are being experimentally studied in certain types of leukemia, one called lymphoma. Now, this was in February 14, 1987. I read about this in Science News, and I wrote to one of the scientists because of the last sentence in that article. It says, in vitro, if I remember this correctly, the sorrelin or the photopheresis is controlling the AIDS virus. So this was of great interest to me. I wrote to him, and he did write back rather guardedly because they don't want to let us know if they're on the brink of a big discovery. But he said, yes, in vitro, the sorrelin would arrest the AIDS virus without arresting the white blood cell. And that's really what AIDS is, the battle between the white blood cell and the AIDS virus. And I had been playing with this herb for years. As a matter of fact, I was criticized because it can cause photosensitivities in somebody. And until April 23rd of this year, I hardly believed them, but down at the Richmond Herb Festival, I wadded up this and I rubbed it right there. Maybe you can see a little bit of a dark spot there now. Yes. But if you don't see it now, I guarantee you will 2 weeks from now. I am now damaging the DNA.
Really?
As soon as I put this in the sunshine, the activity of that compound sorrelin with ultraviolet light causes a bridging in the DNA. And they have clonal antibodies that will go to DNA that's so damaged, such that if that were a tumor, I could direct the poison that would kill the tumor, because that's the only place in my body that's going to have this DNA damaged by sorrelin. Now, that's not a very dramatic blister now, but I got some slides that make it look pretty good. Now, without the ultraviolet light, nothing will happen. So now I'm finishing off my self-experimentation, or shall we call it self-flagellation. But there'll be a brown spot tomorrow and next month and 2 or 3 months from now. And if I get cancer there 3 or 4 years from now, you know that Duke was playing with fire, won't you?
Yes. We'll have it all documented.
Yes. It's really breakthrough science right now, and I'm just a botanist and I don't really understand DNA, but I know that that's a very positive reaction within 2 days after I do that. Now, is this new? The Asian Indians 2,000 years ago used to use the herb called, ironically, Sorrelia, P-S-O-R-A-L-E-A. It's in the bean family. There were dark-skinned Indians who would have white spots, and that was called vitiligo or vitiligo, I don't know how it's pronounced. Leukoderma, I'll get around it that way. And they would rub this seed on the white spot, and it would color them up. 2,000 years ago, they knew about this. Independently, the Egyptians were using something called bishop's weed, Amy Magus, and I just planted some back by the Primrose Path yesterday to see if I can get a second crop this year. That seed contains 2% of sorrelin, and the Egyptians were using that for the same thing. And I think you'll see the black spot in a couple of days, and you'll see why they used it. But we learn a lot from our forefathers this way.
Yes, and it's contained in that.
It's only where I rubbed, where both the drug, sorrelin, and the ultraviolet. Yeah, now if I pinpointed ultraviolet only to a wart there or something of very small size, that's the only place you would get the brown coloration.